Raising up a generation that is both wise and virtuous is no small task, especially in our world today that is constantly competing for our children's attention with distractions and content overload. But it is in the ordinary, day-to-day habits in our homes as families that shape who our children are becoming more than anything else. Our guest today calls these little atomic educational experiences small, faithful practices that form young people to think deeply, navigate wisely in a cultural moment like ours. Join us for this conversation on this episode of BaseCamp Live.
Mountains. We all face them as we seek to influence the next generation. Get equipped to conquer the challenges, summit the peak, and shape exceptionally thoughtful, compassionate, and flourishing human beings. We call it Ancient Future Education for raising the next generation. Welcome to BaseCamp Live. Now your host, Davies Owens.
Welcome to another episode of BaseCamp Live. Davies Owens, your host here. Thank you, as always, for joining us. I always love to hear from you. I say this all the time, and I really mean it because I get encouraging emails almost every week. info@basecamplive.com. By the way, we are getting ready here in 2026 to do more alumni interviews. I've had quite a number of you say, I'd love to hear from more of our alumni. We've got one coming up here in the next few weeks. If you have someone at your school that you think would be a wonderful interview, that would tell their story of the impact of classical education in their life, just drop me a quick email. I'd love to reach out to you and coordinate a time with them. Also, if there are specific questions or topics that you have on your mind that maybe we haven't talked about in a while, love to hear what's on your mind in the three kind of content areas that we talk about, what's happening in the world of classical education, parenting, and culture today. Love to hear what is on your mind. I am especially excited about this conversation with Marissa Streit. She is the CEO of PragerU. She served in the past as a teacher, a school administrator, and a director of a philanthropic institution before she joined PragerU back in 2011. Her experiences in business, education, social media, and nonprofit have enabled PragerU to grow to an audience, and this is amazing, of over 1 billion views every year, influencing millions of young minds every day. Under her leadership, PragerU has grown into one of the largest and most impactful pro-American media networks. She's also the host of the PragerU show, Real Talk, which also garners millions of views, mostly from parents who are concerned about our country. And she's interested in conversations about education, business, and culture. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and 3 children, and it's a joy to have this conversation with her. Before we jump into it, as always, a special thank you to the sponsors of this particular episode, Wilson Hill Academy, great organization that provides online classical Christian education. The Champion Group, who will come next to your school as you're raising funds and resources. The Herzog Foundation, doing training and equipping of school leaders all around the country. Our friends at the Wise Phone, if you're looking for an alternative to a smartphone that has all of that functionality, you can learn more about that. And of course, our own Zipcast, which, by the way, we have limited time here in the next couple of months. It's limited in the sense that there is still time to jump on board and have Zipcast at your school during this school year. You can learn more at zipcast.media, and you can learn more about all of these sponsors on our sponsors partner page. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Marissa. Marissa, it's a joy to have you on BaseCamp Live. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. So from where you sit as a professional in your role, CEO of PragerU, and as a wife and a mom, what do you believe are some of the biggest pressures that are shaping the next generation right now?
You know, I think that parents have been confused because they have been misled. They've been told that they can't do their primary job, and that is to pour into their children and educate their children. They've been told that if they're not experts, and God knows who the experts are and who's making people supposedly experts, right? Like, is it really the teacher seminaries, which are basically left-wing ideologues? The answer is no. But I think that many parents know that it's the case, that they need to step in. They know that it's the case that they are the ones with the best instinct. They know that they're the experts, but they still don't know what to hold on to. They still don't have that confidence because they want to feel like there are specific answers and roadmaps for them to feel that confidence. And really, my goal this year, 2026, is to remind parents that the confidence really can come from within with small, micro, atomic habits that they can take on as parents as they see themselves as the primary educators of their children. Small little baby steps will give you that encouragement and courage to do what it is that you are really born to do. It's within you.
Yeah, and we're going to get into some of this practice. I love that idea of the small atomic kind of educational opportunities that you talk about. But I think a lot of our listeners probably have already are aware and have reacted to the challenges of government schools and just the general state of education in America. They've made very deliberate decisions to put their children in K-12, largely classical Christian schools. The challenge, of course, is that that's not enough. And to your point, maybe just help families think about, from what you're seeing, what are these other challenges? Just because they're kind of insulated from 7:30 to 3, I say on the podcast, the 301 problem, then they're turned back over to their families, and many of them have technology intrusion. What do you see as just things that are undermining a lot of those core formations that are happening during the day in these schools?
Well, I think there's also a lot of confusion. The culture is really counterproductive to education. And so parents feel like they're constantly swimming upstream, or they're constantly fighting, whether they're fighting technology, which you don't have to fight technology. You can actually use the amazing technology that is out there to boost creativity and productivity and passion of learning. But when it's displayed in a way where technology is mostly social media or video games that are really counterproductive and addicting to children, there's all of this confusion of how do you use technology in a way that is productive without fear, and not in a way where you're completely captured by technology, but technology is actually used in a way where you can do good, right? It's that age-old Prometheus story, right? Or fire, right? Fire can be so bad, right, and so destructive, and fire can be so amazing, right? It can, cook the food and kill the bacteria, right? And so I think that that's what many parents are dealing with, is that confusion of how do we discern, right? 2026 through probably the next 5 years are going to be the era of discernment for parents and the era of discernment for children. And how do we teach wisdom and discernment to our children? And that will mean that we don't need to lock ourselves up and not use technology, but how do we use technology in a discerning way, right? How can, even if it's ChatGPT, should you allow your child to use ChatGPT? Well, I would say yes, but it depends how, right? When are they ready to use ChatGPT in a way that really catapults their excitement about learning? So I think that it's not a straight up answer of what are the specific challenges that we have coming our way. It's more like, how do we use these challenges and live with them? Because life is full of challenges.
Right.
How do we live around those challenges? And how do we give our children the tools to live around those challenges, to make those challenges actually a part of our lives in a way that catapults us and doesn't instill fear in us?
Yeah, and that's part of, to your point, there's always been challenges around us in a broken and fallen world. But I know I've heard you talk about, we're also at a point where we're overloaded with content, and yet we're intellectually starving. Talk a little bit about where is that intellectual starvation coming from?
I think the intellectual starvation that we are experiencing is the lack of emphasis on virtues, wisdom, and discernment. And what's so amazing about this is that this is straight out of the Old Testament, right? Right. When David was asked by God, what is it that you would like? He said, give me wisdom and discernment, right? And so the Bible reminds us that nothing is more important than wisdom and discernment. It's not wealth. It's not technology. It's not friends. It's not allies. It's not loyalty. It's wisdom and discernment, right? It's the ability to understand what is ethical, what is moral, what is the right thing to do. These are things that you don't talk about in government schools. And many private schools don't speak about that as well. And so why are Americans and frankly kids around the world intellectually starving is because they're missing what is most important. Humans are born with two very basic needs. We need food, sustenance, and we need meaning. And when we don't give meaning to children, they go and look for meaning elsewhere. And when you look at our schools and you see all of these new isms that are happening, that are captivating our kids, whether it's environmentalism, feminism, transgenderism, all of these new isms, they're the isms that are filling in this void, this vacuum, especially for teens. You talk about the disaffected men. Why are we having so many young men feeling so disaffected? And that is because people need purpose, right? Again, that primary instinct beyond food and sustenance is the sustenance and the nourishment of the soul. And so when we send our kids to schools for so many hours and they get no sustenance, they get no meaning. Meaning comes from virtue. Meaning comes from service. When they're not being told how to find virtue, service, community, they're so focused on their own individualism, which is another religion. They end up being depressed and upset and sad, and frankly, not very productive either, right? If you're so focused on your own self, you can't be productive.
Right.
Many of the homeschoolers have realized that the primary focus of what needs to be taught to children is virtue, is what is noble, is what is good, is what is right. And I think it's one of the reasons why people are running away from these structured schools, because you're wasting all these hours studying all these other isms, and you're not focusing on the most important of it all, and that is God, right?
That's right.
How do you serve God?
And the idea of, there is a value neutral education, to your point, the religion of ism, whichever flavor you pick, is going to be some religion will be thrusted upon your child. You might want to be thoughtful about which one it is. So that's definitely the moment we're in. Why for you, Marissa? I know in your journey growing up in LA and your time in Israel, and fascinating story. I wish we had time to get into all of your bio. I will have shared a little bit of that before, but education has been a part of your story. And I know you served as a teacher and an educator, administrator. Why is education such a formative influence in the lives of young people from your vantage point?
Yeah, I have this, God works in such mysterious ways. And I'm sure we all question, but ultimately we know that he's in control and he knows what he is doing. And so my background, I was born here in the United States and I moved to Israel. I lived in the Holy Land. As an American, I think that when you live outside of the United States of America, you have a whole nother level of appreciation for this amazing country that we are born to. Certainly if you live in the Middle East. And so I lived in Israel as an American, and I noticed something very interesting that happens in Israel, and that is that everybody has to serve their country. And they have to do it because they're under existential threat. Virtually every country around them wants them completely annihilated. And so people feel like they have a duty to their country. And whether they serve in the military, on infantry, or they're a chef, or they're doing some work in education, everybody has to serve their country. Now think about what that does to a teen in their formative years, knowing that they're about to hop into the responsibility of protecting your country, protecting your people. It's an amazing experience. It's an amazing formative experience. It removes you from focusing on your own self and what is fun for you and how much drinking you want to do and how many, fun nights out you want to have. And it actually teaches you responsibility during these formative years. And then when you're 18 years old, you join the military in whatever capacity you have, whatever blessings God has given you, you now take those blessings and you serve others, you serve your country. And so when I was living there and I served in the Israeli military as an American as well, I thought about that a lot. I looked around and I noticed the maturity of these Israeli peers of mine. I noticed the responsibility that they were able to take on. I noticed how the adults looked at them. The adults viewed an 18-year-old child, basically in Israel, as an adult, not as a child. And then I came back to the United States and I went to college here to UCLA. And I looked around and frankly, I saw children. I didn't see children who were viewed by adults as adults. I saw children who are viewed by adults as children. They were treated like children with low expectations. And frankly, the expectations of young American 18-year-olds, I mean, it's a twilight zone. It's night and day. And then and I say child because an 18-year-old should not be a child, but really 18-year-old Americans are treated like children.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, wow, what a formative experience it would be if young Americans found a way to serve their own country. And that stuck with me because then when I got into education, I became a headmistress of a school. I taught K through 8th grade. I really started thinking about how we treat young Americans, adolescents, all the way through teen and 18 years old. And I noticed that stark difference between what I saw in Israel and what I saw in the United States of America.
Yeah.
And when in my own classrooms, I started treating young 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds like they can, like they should, like they could, right? I pushed them a little bit. And I, you know what? They enjoyed it. They were not resentful of it. In fact, they loved it. And as I started studying the curriculum that we teach our kids here in the United States of America, I started realizing that we're not just dumbing down the curriculum. We're not just removing the standards. We're not just lowering the expectations, but we are treating young Americans in a way that we do not believe in them, as if they are victims or not capable. And I realized that that was a war on young Americans. And so America cannot be taken down. My country, the United States of America, cannot be taken down by bullets and tanks. It's too big. It's not as small as Israel. It's not surrounded by the same enemies. But Israel recognizes that it has to do what it can in order to defend its own country. Those of us living here who are committed to our own country, the United States of America, we have to notice the threat on us. And the threat on us comes from within. It comes from our education system, from the dumbing down of the American minds, from the coddling of young Americans, from making young Americans expect less of themselves. And all of this comes from education. Kindergarten through grave, we are telling young Americans that they cannot. And they should not. And we deprive them, as I said earlier, from real meaning. And so I decided after serving Israel, where I lived for a few years, I decided to enlist myself in the United States of America, where I was born and where I'm raising my own children, in the greatest threat, against the greatest threat that I think we're facing here, and that is education.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. As you were talking, I kept thinking about the word adultolescence, which has become quite popular these days, where there's no expectation. And when you don't have a lot of expectation other than just be a child and play video games and live in your parents' basement indefinitely, it's not a very noble or worthy way to live life, which is no doubt the cause behind a lot of anxiety and depression that's out there. I want to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to get into, given all of that's going on around us, how do we inoculate a generation against bad ideas? Education's a part of it, but you have some really wonderful practical ideas. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back and jump back into the conversation. During this short break, I have a special invitation to all school leaders, administrators, and teachers. I want you to imagine for a moment stepping away from your everyday routine at school and diving deep into the rich foundations of Christian education, surrounded by world-class scholars, seasoned classroom teachers, and administrative experts with years of experience running schools with a lot of wisdom to share. That's exactly what the Herzog Foundation's Institute is offering. I've had the joy of serving as a training coach for the last few years, leading their 2.5-day training on spiritual formation and another one on parent engagement. They offer close to 50 unique training events ranging from board governance to marketing to classroom best practices. They even offer a training on how to teach the great books. And the best part of all, well, thanks to the generosity of the Herzog Foundation, these training events, including lodging, are completely free for Christian educators. Institutes are located around the country in beautiful locations, including at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and the Reagan Library in Santa Barbara. Don't miss this incredible opportunity. Check out the details at theherzogfoundation.com. If you're seeking an education that helps your child thrive academically and spiritually, Wilson Hill Academy has spent years Developing a Model That I Want You to Know About. In their free guide, you'll see how their thoughtfully sequenced curriculum prepares students for college and how a biblical worldview helps them understand the world around them with clarity, and how their discussion-based classes teach them to think critically, not just what to think. You'll also discover how their teachers equip students to live purposefully for Christ. With accredited live online classes, your child can learn from master teachers anywhere with an internet connection, all within a community that has transformed families like yours. Download their free guide today at wilsonhillacademy.com/guide or in the link in our show notes. Marissa, as we think about all those things that are coming at us, we have the blessing of having our families and having schools that are in collaboration with our families. This idea of kind of inoculating a generation, what comes to your mind specifically that you would encourage families to think about?
So the first thing that comes to my mind is edutainment. And I used to say that PragerU came up with this concept of edutainment, educational entertainment. And then I realized that actually we didn't. Edutainment has been invented far, far, far before I even thought about it. Maybe a different word was used. And I'll take you back to one of my favorite forms of edutainment. And it's pretty amazing, by the way. You can probably order one of these on eBay because I ordered this on eBay. And this is one of the original Uncle Tom's Cabin from the 1800s. And you can see it's a little disheveled. But the reason I wanted to show this to you is because you probably remember the story of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And there was a thicker book, right, that was created before the Civil War. And it was the way where people realized that we should treat people with dignity. Right, that actually our Constitution, this glorious document, as Frederick Douglass would say, actually tells us that we should treat everybody equally. But it wasn't until edutainment made it into the bloodstream of the culture, where people started reading a story, a human story in their homes. They were entertained by it, but they got educated by it too. And it completely changed the culture and really changed the way people perceived this horrible thing that we did to our fellow humans. Mm-hmm. And later on, they figured that you can actually distill what it is that you have written for adults into children's form. And so this is, in my opinion, the perfect example of edutainment, where you want a child to learn values. You want them to enjoy learning it. So they're going to want to read and reread and read again that same entertaining story, but you're actually educating them, edutainment.
Yeah.
And so, PragerU makes a lot of this kind of educational content, and people have pushed against us in the earlier years. Oh, Marissa, this edutainment thing, don't you think it's a bad thing that they're in front of screens, or shouldn't they always read the classics? And my answer is yes and both, right? It would be great if they read the classics. But my point is this, and this is a controversial point, I know, especially in the classical world. My point is that you have to create micro-atomic educational habits. Mm-hmm. People should enjoy learning. And the act of making learning enjoyment cannot be more sacred and could not be more important, because you want to create those lifelong fibers. And so sometimes you will have a child who is not ready to read C.S. Lewis because it's just too long or too heavy. And so what? So do you give up on that child, or do you try to create small little microatomic habits where they want to get a taste of it, where they taste how beautiful learning is, where they taste how beautiful it is to just satiate their curiosity? And so this is why sometimes we will take more complex books and we'll distill them into videos. And you remember, some kids, some learners are not ready for the written text right away, right? Some of them are more visual or more auditory. And so why not lean into it? Oftentimes edutainment can do that. And so we make videos, we make all kinds of fun ways. In Judaism, we say teach them with honey. You teach the ABCs, the Hebrew alphabet. The custom is to actually take honey and put it on a plate. And so that 4-year-old just looks forward to reading the letters because it's so sweet and so wonderful. And here's another very interesting educational idea that I borrow from Judaism, because We wonder how Jews have survived throughout the years, whether it was through the Roman Empire or through Europe or through Persia. Somehow the Jews maintained their education. And I think there are two main answers. One is we were told to never rely on the government for education. If you've noticed, Jews oftentimes, almost all Jews, will have something called a mezuzah, a little rectangle hanging on the doorpost. Inside that rectangle, there is a commandment straight out of the Old Testament. It's called the Ve'ahavta, and in there it says V'shinantam levanecha, and you should teach them. You should have your children memorize them. It doesn't say the government should teach it. It says you, the parent, should teach the values that have come from God to your children. The most important thing that you need to teach your child should come from you, from your home. And so number one is education in the home. And the number two reason why I think the Jews have been able to preserve their story and their education is through ritual. The ritual in the home is such an incredible way to teach children, frankly, to teach everybody what matters most. And so you may have heard about the Passover ritual, right? To my understanding, Jesus Christ participated in the Passover ritual, right? The Last Supper. Yeah. What is this Passover ritual about? The Passover ritual is to teach about freedom. It's essentially to teach that the cost of freedom might be high, but freedom isn't free, but it is something that is worth doing even when it's highly inconvenient. And the way the Jewish people teach about freedom and the cost of freedom, one of the most important educational lessons of all time, is through a book that is read every single year, the exact same book, and a ritual. And so there are little things that may seem silly, like you will lift a glass of wine or 4 glasses of wine, or you will dip parsley in salt water because the salt water tastes like salty tears, like the slaves in Egypt, right? You have these little rituals that even the adults do together with the children. Think about the power of that lesson. Every single year, you have these rituals. The Sabbath, right? The commandment of observing the Sabbath is a form of a ritual. What is the form of that ritual? It reminds you the importance of remembering that God is the ultimate creator of the world, right? It humbles you. It reminds you all week long, you felt like a big shot, right? All week long, you thought you were in control, but you remember once a week on the 7th day that truly you are not fully in control, and you humble yourself and you pause and you take a day of rest in order to honor God, in order to honor the universe, that you are not fully in control. These are rituals that teach you wisdom and discernment. These are the rituals that allow you, the parent, the family, in a very, very simple way to teach what matters most. And so when I talk about what are ways to bring back truly what matters, is the home and these rituals that you can even develop on your own at PragerU. If I can take a minute, at PragerU, we developed a ritual for our nation here in the United States for 4th of July. And so we took that example of the Passover Seder that I talked about from the Haggadah, and we now created a booklet and a ritual for 4th of July. And what a great year for us to begin this as we celebrate our 250th birthday, right? And to go through a little ritual as a family where you hold up the iced tea to remember the Boston Tea Party, and you dip strawberries in whipped cream to understand why we have red and white stripes on our flag and the numbers of them, right? And so why 13? What were the 13 colonies, right? And so we created this ritual. And this ritual, by the way, is not pediatric. It's not for little babies. It's for all of us. Rituals are kindergarten all the way through 104 years old, even when they seem so simple and so basic. It brings the family together. It brings the community together. It reminds us to speak about what matters most. It instills gratitude in this great country that we live in, gratitude for the people who risk their lives for us to be able to be living free. Yeah. And eventually, by the end of the ceremony, you re-sign the Declaration of Independence. Wow. and you remember what it was like. This was signing their death wish when they signed this declaration, right? So you yourself need to see you through the eyes of the signers of the Declaration every single year, so that you appreciate that freedom isn't free, so that you appreciate what the United States is about, the greatest experiment of all time. This is not a pediatric ritual. It's for the entire family. And if we do it every year, we'll be that much closer to recognizing how lucky we are to be living in this country.
It's such a great reminder, Marissa. I mean, we all have habits that inform our houses, just like there's no value neutral education. There's no ritual free home. You have rituals. It may be everybody comes in and sits on the couch and stares at their phone for 2 hours, or it might be that you're reading to your child, or it might. So all of these things are yours. You know, I say this to the parent, yours for the taking. And I love the idea of being intentional, as you began by talking about around reading. And I do think it's just a lot of our classical sensibilities is like edutainment sounds like let's dumb things down, but that's not what you're saying. And I know that what you're acknowledging for us to consider is that we should enjoy learning. And most children and adults do want to read stories, want to be captivated by them. And that's the beauty, in our classical schools of great books. These are books that have stood the test of time. They're rich stories. And so the idea of both having accessible resources, and at the end, we'll definitely connect folks to PragerU. You've got a wonderful kids resources, which does that. And so the stories that you're bringing to life are rich. These are historic stories of key figures and heroes, not just Captain Underpants type of things that we might want to really call edutainment. This is the real substantive, meaty material, which I love that you guys have put together.
Yeah, well, there's definitely an emphasis on the education part. So it's not just entertaining.
Right.
But I'll share a personal story. I
Yes,
don't know
please.
how many of you and your listeners love working out, but I don't. Okay. And so I try to motivate myself to exercise because it's important and it's healthy.
Yeah, right.
And so I realized that if I go into the week saying that every single day I have to work out so hard for an hour, and I have found myself it's very intimidating for me. And I applied that same logic to education, especially of new areas of education where kids don't feel confident enough. And how do you build confidence? And so I say to myself, you know what? If I can't work out hard every day for an hour, how about I just make a small microatomic commitment to doing so? And so could I do 20 minutes on the bike on a low scale, right? Is it not better than nothing? Now, I'm sure that there is a workout expert out there who's right now just jumping at the screen and typing, no, that's not even worth doing anything. 20 minutes on light on a bike, you're not even moving your body. And I would say, no, I think these small little habits can lead to bigger habits, right? Because maybe I'll fall in love with being on the bike and then I'll accelerate, or I will go harder, or I will stay on longer, right? And I think that is somewhat of an approach that we need to take with some of the learners as well, is that we can't be so judgmental. You know, we're all made in the image of God, but quite differently. And so we need to open the doors and the windows and the pathways from every single direction so that everybody has access to learning. And sometimes that means being incredibly humble about what we're willing to accept. There needs to be a lot of humility when it comes to inviting people into our homes, into our tents. And that will require a lot of creativity. And so at PragerU, that's what we're willing to do. We're willing to be edutainment in order to bring in those young learners who haven't fallen in love with C.S. Lewis yet, but they will. They will once they get a taste of it. They're just overwhelmed by that very thick book on day one.
Well, and I think, you're speaking really to all of us today, whether we like it or not. We live in a world of short attention spans, and we're overwhelmed. And I think so often as we have these conversations, I think about the typical parent that's just thinking, what else am I going to have to do? Or what have I done wrong? Or how? And the idea of just start small. I love this little atomic habits, little atomic experiences. These are manageable, and whatever it is, 5 minutes on the bike, if you haven't ridden a bike, or whatever it is, it's okay. Start small, make it manageable, is what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. And, we talked earlier a little bit about technology, and this is another radical thing that I'm going to say, but, technology is here. Mm-hmm. It's already out. And I know it's incredibly intimidating, But I would also say that there are incredible ways to use technology. I mean, take ChatGPT, for example. I keep talking about C.S. Lewis. He's been on my mind a lot recently. To his credit, I think he's amazing. But let's say you have a 7-year-old and you want to start teaching your 7-year-old about C.S. Lewis so that by the time they're old enough to read the book, they're ready and they're excited about it, right? You can have ChatGPT write a little essay for you about anything that you love from C.S. Lewis at a 7-year-old level, and you can have the child write it. And then you can say to the child, hey, would you like to add a character for C.S. Lewis into this story, right? And you can work side by side with them. And so you could use ChatGPT. Does it mean that you need to block ChatGPT from your household? No, I think that there are ways where you could use ChatGPT. Now, would I hand ChatGPT to my child and say, from now on, you can just use Chat to write your essays? No, that I would not allow. But I would say that technology, like almost all technology, it depends how you use it. Yeah. And I really think that you don't need to be only fearful and intimidated by it. I think you can just turn that lemon into lemonade.
That's a great word. And going on the journey with your child, which is they grow into middle and high school years and they're confronted with all of the crazy things in the world, being able to have those conversations and having had established an environment in your family where conversations can happen is so important. And so I want to take one final break and we'll come right back. I'm curious, I'll set up before the break and say, I know you've talked a lot about, you mentioned America's 250th birthday. There are a lot of amazing things happening that don't necessarily make it to the top of the news in terms of revival and renewal that's happening in our country. I'd love just to hear a few things that you're seeing. Let's take a quick break and we'll come right back. Today's episode of BaseCamp Live is brought to you by my friend Chris Casper, who you heard on a recent episode. His invention, the Wise Phone, is a much-needed third way, providing a solution from the dangers of a smartphone on the one hand and the limited capacities of an old-school flip phone on the other. His simple, distraction-free phone design for families who want technology to serve their real lives and give us and our older children a way to do basic essentials like calling or texting or maps without the web browser and the social media and the endless apps that can pull them and us into the addictive time-wasting aspects of a smartphone. I personally have a Wise Phone and I can vouch that it is an excellent solution and an appropriate way to use technology that supports virtue and focus and healthy habits. Check out the link in our show notes and on our BaseCamp Live website partners page where Chris is offering BaseCamp Live listeners a discount. School leaders, if you've ever wondered how to make school fundraising truly effective while being meaningful and mission-driven, check out Advance. It's an event being run by our good friends at the Champion Group. The Advance gathering is April 8th through the 10th, 2026 in Greensboro, North Carolina. And here's the best part. It is completely free to attend. You just have to cover travel and lodging. Advance is for heads of schools and boards and development directors, leaders who feel the pressure to raise big dollars without losing sight of their calling. At Advance, you're going to find tools and training and encouragement while connecting with peers from around the country. You're going to learn from top development experts and leave with real-world strategies that you can put into practice right away. Plus, every attendee receives a complimentary development evaluation and review. Spots are limited. It's a great opportunity. Don't wait. Register today. Check out the links in the show notes for more information, as well as on our BaseCamp Live partners page. Marissa, there's a lot of bad news that we can find pretty easily out there in the media today, but there's also a lot of good news. And our country is hitting this amazing milestone, 250 years. Not every country makes it that far. There's a lot of things that are happening in terms of spiritual renewal and revival. Share some things that you see going on.
Well, one of my favorite things that's happening is the 10 Commandments are back into the classrooms. And I think we need to, just put the foot on the gas, because really, if at the end of the day, if our nation follows the 10 Commandments, we'll be in such better shape. I mean, you really want to abolish the police? You can just follow the 10 Commandments. We can abolish the police.
It's a lot easier. Yep.
Right. And so many other amazing lessons, like, the Sabbath itself and just taking pause. So the 10 Commandments, making it back into our education bloodstream, is just a huge thing. And I just don't think we should underestimate how significant that is. It really changes the conversation around morality, ethics, and what matters. Also, PragerU produced a board game, and talk about just having resilience and innovation, my team figured out how to make an actual physical thing, because usually we make virtual videos and books, and then we decided to actually make a board game. It's entirely made in America. The story behind how to manufacture something in the United States is unbelievable. If you're a homeschooler, I really think that you and your kids should try to make a board game, because you will learn so much about that world. But anyway, PragerU has made an America 250 board game. It's a great way to practice your knowledge and compete over. I'm a very big fan of competition. I'm not into participation trophies. Yeah. And so the whole family can compete over their knowledge of America. You have the board game? Okay. Yeah. There it is.
Kind of a shoots and ladders thing going on there.
I have it in the back here, yeah. So you can find it on our website. It's also on Amazon. I think we sold out, but we're replenishing as fast as possible. It's a great tool for learning about America. We're going to have a huge civics competition too, where you can win thousands of dollars if you are smart about our country. And so that's another thing that we're bringing to the public, just a little bit of a competition around the good stuff.
That's awesome.
I think is great.
Yeah.
And you'll see the trucks that we've designed for the White House. They're going to start driving around all around America. These are mobile museums, so you can go and visit. There's going to be a hologram of George Washington, a whole bunch of videos.
Wow.
We've used AI to bring some of the signers of the Declaration to life, so you can kind of meet them and hear about their biographies. And to find out where the trucks are going to be, you're going to have to go to the White House webpage, because they're in control of the route. But we produce the edutainment and all the content in there.
That's
and
so fun.
Believe me, it's wholesome, patriotic, and incredibly appropriate.
That's amazing. I know. I saw the image of these like giant 18-wheelers, and the wings pop out on the side and make this rolling museum. It's quite impressive.
Yeah.
Well done.
I'm telling you, this 10 years ago, somebody asked me whether I'm going to be designing mobile trucks. Probably not, but here we are.
Well, I love what you guys do. Thank you so much for sort of just giving a word of encouragement to our families and educators. There is a lot of good news in the world today, and a lot of hope for the next generation. Thank you for all you're doing to pour into that next generation.
Well, thank you. And your listeners are doing the most important work that could be done. And that is to, again, arm our kids, educate our kids. So I'm incredibly grateful to all the mama bears and the papa bears for putting in the work. And I hope you enjoy it. It's so much fun to pour into our children. So much fun. Just love every moment.
It is. It's a gift. And it happens quick. They grow up fast. So take a lot of pictures and invest in them. So thank you for your great words today. So enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Happy birthday, America.
Thank you for listening to this episode of BaseCamp Live. Be sure to check out our website, basecamplive.com, for more than 8 years of timeless episodes that you'll find helpful and encouraging, as well as the helpful resources offered on our partners page. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of our partners like the Herzog Foundation. See you back next week.